Zambia. Tazama. Yep. Cheni kae pale. Wacha.
Nani? Take one. So help me God. Na rais wa Palestina Mahmoud Abbas alikutana na waziri wa mashauri ya nchi za kigeni wa Marekani Anthony Blinken kwenye ukingo wa magharibi mwa mto Jordan, ambapo walijadili masuala mbalimbali yakiwemo utaifa wa Wapalestina na hali katika ukanda wa Gaza. Waziri wa mashauri ya nchi za kigeni wa Syria Faisal Mekdad alikariri kwamba swala linalopewa umuhimu zaidi nchini humo ni kupinga kuwepo kwa vikosi vya kigeni ambavyo havijaidhinishwa nchini humo. Mtazamaji, kwa vile kahawa kutoka barani Afrika linapata umaarufu mkubwa sana miongoni mwa watumiaji kote duniani, maafisa wa chama cha kahawa barani Afrika wamewahimiza wafanyabiashara wa kahawa barani humo kuimarisha uuzaji kahawa iliyoboreshwa na kukoma kuuza kwenye soko la kimataifa kahawa ambayo haijatayarishwa. Nchini Marekani, bunge la Senate nchini Marekani linalothibitiwa na wabunge wa chama cha Democratic liliidhinisha mswada kwa Ukraine, Israel na washirika wake wengine wa kigeni kupitia kura muhimu, ingawa kura hiyo ilipingwa na wabunge wa chama cha Republican kwani haijumuishi marekebisho makubwa ambayo wabunge hao wamesema ni muhimu kwa usalama wa mpakani. Na Benki ya Maendeleo barani Afrika na shirika la UNHCR zilitangaza azma ya kuimarisha ushirikiano wao katika kuwasaidia watu waliopoteza makazi na jamii zinazowahifadhi nchini Sudan ya Kusini. Katibu Mkuu wa Umoja wa Mataifa Antonio Guterres alihimiza juhudi za kimataifa za kukabiliana na changamoto zinazotokana na uhaba wa chakula na mizozo inayosababishwa na hali ya anga. Shirika la UNICEF linashughulikia athari za mafuriko katika Jamhuri ya Kidemokrasia ya Kongo, huku mto Kongo ukiongezeka kufikia viwango ambavyo havijashuhudiwa katika muda wa zaidi ya miaka 60 na kukithiri kwa chamko la ugonjwa wa kipindupindu. Tuangazie mchango wa China katika mataifa kote ulimwenguni, ambapo China sasa imeendeleza uhusiano na mataifa mbalimbali kote duniani, ukiwemo ule wa kimatibabu, kielimu, muundo msingi na aina nyingine za uhusiano kama hivi. Weka weather sasa, weka weather.
Corporation, good afternoon.
Mheshimiwa, tuombe. Ewe Mwenyezi Mungu ambaye kwa hekima na wema wako umetoa nyadhifa za mabunge na kwa ustawi wa jamii na utawala wa haki wa wanadamu, takusihi utasame kwa neema nyingi sisi watumishi wako ambao wameridhika kutuita ili tutekeleze shughuli muhimu za jamhuri yetu. Tutakuomba uteremshie baraka zako sisi tulikutanika hapa, na utujalie tuyatende na kufikiria mambo yote yatakayofikisha mbele yetu kwa njia ya haki na uaminifu, ili utukufu na sifa zako siendelezwe, na ili kustawisha amani, ufanisi na heri hii yetu na wale ambao haja zao umezikabidhi mikononi mwetu. Amen. Members, you are continuing to do very well. And this must be the spirit. Congratulations. The Speaker must always find you here and must always leave you here. Clerk, we have quorum to transact business. Can we proceed?
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Majority Leader.
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, February 15th, 2024. A, legal notice number 44 of 2024 relating to the Computer Misuse and Cybercrime, Critical Information Infrastructure and Cybercrime Management Regulations 2024, and the explanatory memorandum for the Minister of Interior and National Administration. B, reports of the Auditor General and financial statements for the year ended 30th June 2023 and the certificates therein in respect of 1, National Exchequer Account, the National Treasury; 2, State Department for Sports and Arts; 3, Equalization Fund; 4, Revenue Statement of Receiver of Revenue, State Law Office and Department of Justice; Street Families Rehabilitation Trust Fund; 6, State Department for Culture and Heritage; 7, State Department for Forestry; 8, State Department for Gender and Affirmative Action; 9, State Department for Diaspora Affairs; 10, State Department for Devolution; 11, 12, National Assistance Trust Fund for Victims of Trafficking in Persons; 13, Kenya Shipyard Limited; 14, East Africa Tourist Visa Fee Collection Account, the National Treasury; 15, Commission on Revenue Allocation Staff Car Loan Scheme Fund; 16, Salaries and Remuneration Commission Mortgage and Car Loan Scheme Fund; and 17, Revenue Statement, State Department for Blue Economy and Fisheries. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the thank you.
Thank you. Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs.
Thank you. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, 15th February 2024. Report of the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs on its consideration of the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 67 of 2023, together with the compendium of reports of 7 departmental committees on the consideration of the bill, namely Labor, Blue Economy, Water and Irrigation, Social Protection, Sports and Culture, Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Energy, and finally Finance and National Planning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
Majority Leader, your Thursday's statement.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 44.2a, I rise to give the following statement on behalf of the House Business Committee, which met on Tuesday, 13 February 2024, to prioritize business for consideration during the week. This was our first meeting this session, Honorable Speaker, that you chaired. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, allow me to once again welcome members back from the long recess. And as we recollect and acknowledge the strides taken during the second session, I wish to point out that the mission of the 13th Parliament is not yet over. We still have a significant number of legislative proposals, bills, and other parliamentary business that require our consideration. In this regard, the cumulative effort of each and every one of us and committees is critical for the realization of our constitutional mandate as bestowed upon us by the great people of Kenya. Honorable Speaker, with regard to business scheduled for Tuesday next week, the House is expected to consider the following bills at second reading, if not concluded today. 1, the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendments number 2, Bill of 2023. 2, the National Disaster Risk Management Bill of 2023. 3, the Cotton Industry Development Bill, Senate Bill number 5 of 2023. 4, the Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill, Senate Bill number 6 of 2022. 5, the Employment Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 11 of 2022. 6, the Petitions to Parliament Procedure Amendment Bill 2022. And 7, the Regional Development Authorities Bill of 2023. Honorable Speaker, with regards to the attendance of Cabinet Secretaries to answer to questions from members, I wish to inform the House that arrangements are ongoing. And for clarity, Honorable Speaker, it is expected that for this session, we will begin having Cabinet Secretaries appearing on Wednesday, February 28th, 2024. Members are encouraged to be present to ask their questions as well as any supplementary questions that they may require to ask. Having said that, Honorable Speaker, I wish to note that the House Business Committee will reconvene again on Tuesday.
Mr. Speaker, this bill is trying to ensure that each and every Kenyan gets access to water. You remember, Mr. Speaker, when we had an issue of, was it Muranga? When they were Muranga tunnel that was supposed to supply water that needs for domestic use or industrial use in this city. Mr. Speaker, one of the biggest challenges, including Nairobi City County and other major towns in this country, Mr. Speaker, one of the biggest challenges is access to clean and safe water, Mr. Speaker. Almost 80% of diseases are waterborne diseases, either consumption or drinking of not safe and dirty water, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, any bill or any law that comes up from either side that will continue to ensure Kenyans access to clean and safe water, Mr. Speaker, should be encouraged. From the reading of this water amendment bill, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that it tries and brings public partnership, the PPP. Mr. Speaker, you know government is not in the business of doing business. So this, when you look at the definition under Section 2, it gives contracting authority, both national and the county governments. Mr. Speaker, as we discuss, we need only, because I know nowadays we have what we call County Public Investment Committee, CPIC, where water companies, non-revenue water, our companies are being run, Mr. Speaker, the waterworks that are there, Mr. Speaker, is that we need to be more careful. The issue should be, we have seen most of the water companies in counties are not being run properly. They are either being run down. There is a lot of revenue called non-revenue water, Mr. Speaker. There is normally a lot of challenges with our water companies, especially at the county level, Mr. Speaker. We have I think one of the best run companies is Eldoret Water and Sanitation Company, among others, Mr. Speaker. It's one of the best run in the country, Mr. Speaker. But when you look at Nairobi Water and Sanitation Company, Thanati, Lake Victoria North and South, Mr. Speaker, and many other waterworks, Mr. Speaker, are companies and waterworks that are just wasting a lot of our money, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my proposal, and I can see the immediate former Wazingishu governor is excited that I have mentioned Eldoret's Water and Sanitation Company. I think he might have an input in proper running of that water company. Mr. Speaker, what we need to do at this country, we need to stop these waterworks. There are so many for nothing. Like Victoria North Waterworks, they are just employment bureaus. The assets they own is disaster. They only coupling our resources. But if you ask what they have done, you cannot, even the assets. They are most of the going concerns, Mr. Speaker, most of waterworks in this country. Like where we have like Victoria Water North Company, Mr. Speaker, I'm part of, Nandi is part of that region, but we are yet to see substantive fruits. Mr. Speaker, when you go to the offices in Kakamega County, Mr. Speaker, even if it encompasses a number of counties, Mr. Speaker, it is sad that in some of the offices in Kakamega, you can speak one local language and they can do an AGM meeting, Mr. Speaker, or a management meeting under one language, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have seen Central Waterworks, North Rift, Central Waterworks, Mr. Speaker, Lake Victoria South, Mr. Speaker. All these Dana Adi, they have continued to become bastions of corruption, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Sotsi,
yes.
You know what to do for the Speaker to catch your eye. It's not about raising your hands. You've been in this House long enough to know how to raise a point of order. What's your point of order, Senator Sotsi?
Mr. Speaker, is it in order for my neighbor, Senator Cherigei, to claim that Lake Victoria North Waterworks Company, they hold meetings in a particular language, when he knows that the chairperson of Lake Victoria North is actually not a Luya, he's a Teso? So is he in order to mislead this House that meetings at Lake Victoria North are done in a particular language?
Senator Sotsi, if I heard Senator Cherigei well, he stated that there is a possibility and that they may if I heard him right. However, Senator Cherargei, could you substantiate that? Is exactly what you said?
Mr. Speaker, I might not be an expert in linguistics, but all Luhya languages are similar, Mr. Speaker, unless there's difference of dialect. So what he has just confirmed, I didn't mention any particular tribe, Mr. Speaker, but he has confirmed that the Lake Victoria North Waterworks is, he has said that Teso, and you know, Teso and Luhya language almost have similar at some point, but different dialects, Mr. Speaker. What I'm just saying is that it is irony, Mr. Speaker, that Lake Victoria North, part of it is Nandi. But what I'm saying, the human resource, Mr. Speaker, is part of Nandi. But when you go to the people who work, people who do the job in that Victoria North, Mr. Speaker, Lake Victoria North, you don't see the face of where the waterworks covers, and that is my concern. I wish we could even see the face of Kenya for that purposes, even if not the face of Lake Victoria North Waterworks. I've seen also there is what we call North Rift Waterworks that was established, is Central Rift or North Rift Waterworks. My point is that most of these waterworks are a bastion of corruption, Mr. Speaker, because they get a lot of billions of shillings to do some of those projects. For example, Mr. Speaker, in Nandi County, we are expecting to get a Keben water dam that will supply millions and millions of water to Kapsabet town and parts of both Nandi Hills constituency and Mgwen constituency, Mr. Speaker, or sub-counties. We are looking at Kipkaren Dam that will supply part of Kapseret constituency, Masop sub-county, and also Chesume sub-county, Mr. Speaker. All these are managed between waterworks. What I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't make sense to have so many waterworks if we can synchronize them so that it becomes easy, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, on the issue of public-private partnership, I think this is welcome, it's well-defined. I don't want many people that are saying this is eroding devolution, Mr. Speaker, or undermining devolution. It does not undermine. Because when you say contracting authority, it has given power to national government. And we know national government has its own waterworks that run, Mr. Speaker. When you look at the county government, by private, it has been given opportunity to do their own contracting authority, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of water licensing providers, water service providers, I think, Mr. Speaker, it is either the county or specific waterworks, Mr. Speaker, that can ensure that water service providers are given that are given the authority to supply water. And we see water vendors, Mr. Speaker, especially Nairobi. Water vendors is a common. If you don't see water vendors in Nairobi, then there is something wrong, because it's part of Nairobi life, Mr. Speaker. Some of the towns, Mr. Speaker, like other towns still have that privilege. Even if you go to Mombasa City, Mr. Speaker, the fact that Mzima Springs, has not been able to give sufficient water to Nairobi City, to Mombasa City, Mr. Speaker. Similar, Kisumu, there are many cities, even Eldoret is doing somehow better off. You see there was Sondu Dam that was supposed to be completed, Mr. Speaker. A number of cities do not have what you call water sustainability, Mr. Speaker. So when you have a way of providing water, is to ensure so that, Mr. Speaker, we know water vendors. Sometimes we don't know the quality of regulation of those water vendors or water service providers who ensures that we have clean and safe water. What are the mechanisms that have been put, Mr. Speaker? And therefore, what I'm providing on water service provider is to have partnership, Mr. Speaker, between the county government and the national government. It can become a shared function, an intergovernmental shared function, Mr. Speaker. Because also everybody needs to access to water, Mr. Speaker. And I request that you protect me from Senator Muma, Mr. Speaker. Also, there is a national public waterworks shall not be transferable to a county government. I think because most of the waterworks, this is an open explanation, Mr. Speaker. Because if you are to discuss about Anaade today, it covers a number of counties. Same to Lake Victoria North, same to Central Works, Lake Victoria South, Mr. Speaker. Even Coast Waterworks, Mr. Speaker. It covers a number of counties. So you cannot transfer to individual counties. It is a basic explanation, Mr. Speaker. But I agree with the initial proposal that we must find a way of synchronizing and ensuring that state corporations, Mr. Speaker, are limited. We should not be creating state corporations that take a lot of revenue, Mr. Speaker. You remember most of these state corporations, we have to pay for them when they are going concern on under losses, Mr. Speaker. And I'm surprised that most Kenyan leaders, including some of us, Mr. Speaker, have double speak. When the president was proposing that we need to offset some of the state corporations that were in red, Mr. Speaker, most of us were opposing. A number of people here who are proposing double standards are the same people who objected, even, for example, KICC to be sold and a number of corporations, because most of them are coupling public resources, Mr. Speaker. When you come to KICC, where offices are, Mr. Speaker, the cockroaches are sharing office space with some of us, washrooms and many others. But if you privatize, Mr. Speaker, we might get better services. Even replacing a bulb in some of our offices might take a whole financial year, Mr. Speaker. So, even when you talk about leasing of sugar companies, and I'm happy the cabinet memo came out yesterday that no one is selling, but they are leasing sugar companies. Like Moroni, Chemelil, Zoia, among a number of sugar companies. Because, Mr. Speaker, I'm part of nucleus, especially from Chemaze, Tindred sub-county, Masab sub-county, Mr. Speaker. It's about leasing to turn around to profitability for the betterment of Kenyans. It is not for any other body, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other point, or the issue of Section 72, clause number 7, evaluate, Mr. Speaker, and approve water and sewerage tariffs, bulk water tariffs, and approve the imposition of such tariffs in line with consumer protection standards. Mr. Speaker, we need also as a country to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that the water tariffs or the prices of water should not be too expensive again. While we push for access of safe and clean water to each and every Kenyan, Mr. Speaker, we must in a way also ensure they are protected, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I was raising a question with these water vendors, water service providers. Where is, do they get, I know they get license, but what is the public health department doing about it, Mr. Speaker? How do we ensure that the water that is being sold by water vendors or in our taps are safe for human and animal consumption, Mr. Speaker? Even for industrial use, when most of the companies and industrial discharge used water through industrial processes, is the issue of recycling of that water sufficient and clean enough and safe for Kenyans to use, Mr. Speaker? So, Speaker, sadly to say, Consumer Protection Unit and Competition Authority of Kenya are sleeping on the job. Because, Mr. Speaker, I saw the other day in Isli, I saw the issue of border milk, Mr. Speaker. I remember there was one company before Kenya Kwanza took over, Mr. Speaker, and has liberalized the market. They had been given only right to make powder milk, Mr. Speaker. But I was disappointed that why would the police and other agencies go and forcefully open doors, forcefully take some of the products, yet we have Competition Authority of Kenya. Yet we have Consumer Protection Unit, Mr. Speaker. Yet we have Kenya Bureau of Statistics. Yet we have Kenya Revenue Authority. Mr. Speaker, because when you discuss with a lot of businessmen, especially in Isli, Mr. Speaker, most of those border milk were cleared at the port of Mombasa. Why would you come and look for a trader, a small trader somewhere in Tala or somewhere in Machakos, Mr. Speaker, and come with commando style, Mr. Speaker? Yet there are agencies that you should have called upon. Like, for example, Competition Authority of Kenya, the Protection Standards, Consumer Protection Unit, Mr. Speaker, COFEC, Federation of Consumer in the country, Mr. Speaker. The process that we must do to protect our people, Mr. Speaker. Because we are assuming that we are reactionary. Because we don't know a number of people who have consumed that border milk by the time that soup is being done. So we must agree that they should be consumer, even including water, Mr. Speaker. Let the price of water be within the range, Mr. Speaker, within the range that can be afforded. Mr. Speaker, I know my time is fast spent, and colleagues want to say the contracting authority, Mr. Speaker, should be, finally, to say something on water tribunal. I think this is an obvious, Mr. Speaker, so that when there are disputes of licensing, disputes of water provision, Mr. Speaker, this is a straightforward matter. Mr. Speaker, I want to urge my colleagues who are resisting this amendment, there is nothing mischievous that it is in this law. It is black and white. It does not undermine devolution, Mr. Speaker. It seeks to enrich devolution, Mr. Speaker. It needs to ensure, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy my chair is back in the House, Mr. Speaker. I had seen in one of these social handles, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Kavindu Agnes wants to inform you. Do you want to be informed?
No, I can get information at the lunch while we are having tea with her, so that I conclude. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you know, I have a right to decline the information. I don't know why they walked up, Mr. Speaker. But I will listen to her in private. She better advises me in private, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the water tribunal, this is a straightforward matter that we must look at it, Mr. Speaker. It is to resolve disputes that arise, Mr. Speaker. And as I was saying, it is good to see my chair back, Mr. Speaker. I saw him endorsing his party leader to run for the AU chairmanship in the coming elections. So, and I can see he's very happy today, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, with all intents, I want to assure the country, Mr. Speaker, that this amendment is for the betterment of devolution. It does not in any way undermine devolution, Mr. Speaker. Let us give enrichment to this. We want to enrich all the laws. There is a catalogue of laws, Mr. Speaker, that at the end of the day are very critical in development, Mr. Speaker. I want to ask my colleagues from both sides, including my brother and senior counsel, who has been my, you know, incidentally, Mr. Speaker, you, the Speaker, and him have defended me before in trenches of the fight for justice in this country, that there is nothing sinister about this bill. Let us finish today, call for a division, allow every Kenyan to access clean and safe water in their taps or through water vendors or through service. Mr. Speaker, with those very, very remarks, I support this bill and I thank you.
With the issue of houses. And Madam Speaker, it is an obsession because we are fighting to build houses for personal individuals when our children in this country do not even have classes for grade 9. And at the end of this year, junior secondary is supposed to have grade 9. Here we are talking about building houses. We are not a communist country, Madam Speaker. Communist countries are the ones that figure out personal things. We are a capitalist nation. People go to school, and then you go out there and fight for your space and get your resources. So, Madam Speaker, I feel that we seem to be losing the script. But, Madam Speaker, allow me to dispense of certain myths that have always been talked about in this housing project. First one, we have been told here over and over again in public barazas in the House that affordable housing is going to create employment. Let me tell you, Kenyans are not looking for part-time employment, casual employment. People are looking for jobs that are permanent and pensionable. All the homes we live in were built by people. Are they building now? Are those masons still working there now? Madam Speaker, we must figure out how to create employment and stop deceiving Kenyans and telling them that this thing of housing is going to make them, permanently employed. Madam Speaker, it's also important to note that there's another myth that was peddled during the period of campaigns. And people are told it's bottom up. The people at the bottom of the bracket are going to be brought up. Madam Speaker, now it is clear that Boda Boda and Mama Mboga that were talked about during campaign trail are going to be deducted money for houses that they will probably never own because they can't afford them. Madam Speaker, that is the reality. But Madam Speaker, let's talk about some of these issues that are also constitutional. The issue of housing is actually devolved to the county governments. Fourth schedule is very clear about the responsibilities that are assigned to national government and those that are assigned to the county governments. And I want to confirm that Part 2, subsection 8 of the fourth schedule clearly indicates that housing is actually a function of county government. So, Madam Speaker, as we deal with this, we must know that the national government has only got one role, and that is policy. not implementation, not in building houses, not in getting land from members, that is not the purpose of the national government. Madam Speaker, on the matter of the levy, because this is one of those things that even when Kenyans did public participation, they said no to. And public participation was actually stopped by the courts of law. And somehow, one of the committees of the House sneaked all over the place and carried out some arrangement of public participation, which was actually illegal, Madam Speaker, if you are to ask me. But then the reality is this, that the levy was already denounced by Kenyans. 90% of Kenyans, during the public participation on the finance bill, said no to the issue of the levy. But now, Madam Speaker, let's talk about that levy. Madam Speaker, pay-as-you-earn income tax are generalized taxes that everyone pays. Madam Speaker, excise duty, VAT, are those taxes that are charged, and only consumers of the goods and services pay that. It's like a toll on the road. It is only the user of the expressway that pays a toll. Now, why is it that you're making every Kenyan pay for houses and not every Kenyan will be a consumer? There are Kenyans, Madam Speaker, who already have mortgages. They are paying mortgages. Civil servants, teachers, public servants that are already actually so high in debt because they are paying for their mortgages. And then you are taking away 1.5% and telling them now you're going to build houses for other people. Madam Speaker, I find this very, very unfair. But Madam Speaker, as I finish, it's important to talk about the regulations, because there are regulations that will eventually be made on the basis of this bill, just in case this bill passes, because I personally am opposing it. Just in case the voting block will be used to pass this thing in the House, I want to point out some of the dangers that we face. First and foremost, what is the valuation and how will the valuation of the houses be done? We are aware that currently some of the affordable houses are more expensive than commercial houses that are being put up by developers. And Madam Speaker, is shocking considering the land is given for free by government and the money that is being used is taxpayers' money. How does an investor buy land and then take a loan and build a house and charge less than what is being charged by this affordable housing? It is unfortunate, but this smells of a scam, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the other issue is the repayment period. Because the law here does not talk about the repayment period. When we are making regulations, if this passes, let us be careful to name the repayment period. You cannot leave it open-ended. Because, Madam Speaker, I will tell you what I have noticed here, that there are 3 categories of houses, and they talk about the earnings of the people. And then they are saying that for you to acquire this, you must be able to afford 1/3 of your salary. And there are some people who have been named here that have earned salaries less than 20,000. A person earning 15,000, Madam Speaker, would pay 5,000 a month. A house of 3.5 million, Madam Speaker, would take them 58 years to pay. What repayment period is that? Is that even heavenly possible? Who can start working and be paying for a house for 58 years? So the repayment period must be thought through and discussed and put in the regulations so that we can address it. And finally, Madam Speaker, the Section 31, subsection B, talks about application for allocation. And it says that the agency will make decisions on any other information that may be determined. In essence, what we are doing, we are actually inappropriately delegating powers of this House to the Cabinet Secretary. Because the minute you say that they can make regulations further, they can make those decisions later, and you're not asking or compelling within the bill that this be part of the regulations, then it means you're giving them an open check. They can decide tomorrow it is tall people who will get the houses, it is short people who will get the houses, it is people of less than so many kilos. Madam Speaker, we must be very, very specific. But with those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I feel that this, Madam Speaker, is a bill that we cannot support, and I oppose.
Before we get to the next speaker, allow me to acknowledge students in the public gallery. Number 1, Diamond Junior School from Starehe constituency, Nairobi, and USIU Africa students from Roysambu, Nairobi County. On your behalf and the House, we welcome them to observe the proceedings of the House. The next chance will go to the member for Sigowet Soin, Honorable Justice Kemei.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity you've given me to contribute to this bill. On the onset, Madam Speaker, I wish to say I support the bill. And I support the bill, Madam Speaker, with 4 reasons. Number one, Madam Speaker, when we fought for independence in this country, we promised our people that we would give them shelter among other basic requirements. Madam Speaker, this is the first deliberate step that we've taken as a nation to make sure that our people have reasonably good accommodation and providing good shelter for them. Secondly, Madam Speaker, we have a big problem of unemployment in this country. And if you go to construction sites, wherever you see some construction taking place, Madam Speaker, you will see quite a number of Kenyans milling around looking for employment. The housing project, the housing program that will come out of what we're discussing today in Parliament, Madam Speaker, will ensure that the majority of the people who are unemployed in this country get a means of earning an income, even if it is for a short period. And Madam Speaker, we are not talking about laborers alone. We are talking about the professionals in the entire spectrum of employment in this country. We are talking of architects, we are talking of engineers, we are talking of electricians, we are talking of masons, Madam Speaker. This is a very, very good program in which they will be able to get employment. Thirdly, Madam Speaker, I wish to ask the supporters of the bill, and particularly the leader of majority who has brought the bill to Parliament, please make sure that housing is spread all over the country. We must make sure that housing is not in the Nairobi alone, housing is not in the cities alone, housing should be spread to all parts of this country, so that when we look at Kenya, we're looking at a country that looks like the rest of the world. Madam Speaker, finally, if I asked my good friend, Honorable Opiyo Wandayi, to raise his hand, Madam Speaker, it doesn't matter which hand he raises. If he raises the left hand, he has raised his hand. If he raises the right hand, he has raised his hand. So, Honorable Opiyo Wandayi, my good friend, this bill is good, however you look at it. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I support.
I see Honorable Opiyo Wandayi looking at you suspiciously. Just to confirm, we were just saying, he was saying something good about it. As a good friend. The next chance will go to the member for Ugenya, Honorable Ochin.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much for this opportunity. Madam Speaker, all governments over the world get defined by the things that they do during the time they've been given by the citizens to govern. Governments come to power with their own plans. And this government, Madam Speaker, has decided that this is one thing that they will rise or fall with, that they will make sure that they dignify and humanize the way Kenyans live, that they will ensure that Kenyans are able to get houses that are habitable, houses that dignify them, regardless of how much they earn in their place of work, Madam Speaker. And that's why, Madam Speaker, I want to support this bill, Madam Speaker, because affordable housing is a real issue in this country, Madam Speaker. If you go around the country, it's just not in the slums, it's all over the country. The houses people live in, Madam Speaker, you go to some places in Nyanza, some places in the coast, they are not fit for human habitation. And that's why you're saying, Madam Speaker, that government is required by law to ensure that the housing system that's in the country supports dignified lives under Article 25 of the Constitution, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, number two, the reason this housing program is very important is to help stimulate the construction industry in this country, Madam Speaker. We need to ensure that the housing industry is able to support jobs. And before I go far, Madam Speaker, I want to tell my friend, Honorable Bumbui, that we are not looking at Mijengo jobs. Madam Speaker, the housing industry starts with steel, cement, it goes all the way to timber. It is not Mijengo jobs of 2 days, 3 days, Madam Speaker. It is a whole industry, Madam Speaker. And that's why, Madam Speaker, I want to say that one thing that we as MPs must do is to ensure that this housing, affordable housing fund is able to help us give rise to industries that will come because of the housing sector boom. Now, Speaker, I say this because in the last 8 years, Madam Speaker, we spent $500 billion shillings, Madam Speaker, to build a railway line, but without a single town, without a single industry, without a single city being built on the wake of $500 billion shillings, Madam Speaker. When we built the railway line, Madam Speaker, when we did the railway line, we were importing cement. We even imported sand because we allowed Chinese to bring here prefabricated rolling stock. We allowed Chinese to bring bolts and nuts. We allowed Chinese to bring everything, Madam Speaker. And so I want to request those who will be in charge of implementing this housing fund that, first of all, we must ensure that the procurement is done right. Madam Speaker, personally, I've had an issue with the way we've gone implementing this housing scheme so far, because we want to have your Kali sector benefit from this housing scheme. We want to have our own industries benefit from this scheme, Madam Speaker. And we cannot go to launch a housing scheme in Homa Bay, and we have not prepared the Juakali sector there to prepare the hinges, the doors, the windows, Madam Speaker. You cannot go launching them in Mombasa, and you've not prepared the Juakali there to. Madam Speaker, I support this bill, but I believe that sequencing is going to be key to ensure that the gains that we're going to make in the housing boom goes to the common management, Madam Speaker. Number two, Madam Speaker, the biggest issue today in the country is, do we have a framework for equitable distribution and allocation of this house, Madam Speaker? I want to plead with the majority leader because this is important to me. The question that's being talked about by Honorable Ndai and Honorable Mbui, we should provide solutions. If you believe that this bill currently does not provide for a way of getting Mamamboga and Bodaboda getting houses, let's write it in the law. Let's put a quota for them. And I'm going to convince the majority leader that we must have a quota under Part 4. Let's have a quota for those kind of people, Madam Speaker. Honorable Ichunga, I hope
Honorable Ocheng, Honorable Ndai has a point of order. What is out of order?
Actually, I didn't intend to interrupt my good friend and neighbor, Honorable Ocheng, but I really want to understand whether he's in order for him to direct his address to us, I and Honorable Robert Mbui, and to demand that we provide solutions to the affordable housing crisis. Honorable Speaker, is that conceivable? Is that really conceivable? Honorable Speaker, can you rule him out of order?
Honorable Ocheng, did you address the Honorable Member for Ugenya, for Uguja?
Madam Speaker, that is what a responsible position does. It doesn't just oppose for the sake. Our position that is responsible provides solutions. We don't just say this is wrong. You tell us how to do it right. And in this bill, I believe that instead of saying that there's no place for Mamboga and Bodaboda, tell us how to improve it. And I'm going to talk to the majority here, Madam Speaker, that we provide under Part 4 quotas. We must have the quotas for those Bodabodas. You must have the quotas for the Mamambogas. You must have a provision that says that if 100 houses are built in a place, 40 of them will go to Mamamboga or Bodabodas. We must have that in the law. That's the way to go. You don't just say it's wrong and you keep quiet. You say it's wrong and provide solutions on how this can be done. Now, Speaker, all over the world, we've talked about Singapore, we've talked about Taiwan and Malaysia. These countries grew on the back of housing booms. What's going to mess our housing program, Madam Speaker, for me, is corruption. It's corruption. That's what we're talking about. To ensure that these big projects are going to be corruption-free, Madam Speaker. We can make a good law in this parliament, but if you don't follow up with implementation and ensure that things are done the right way, Madam Speaker, will not go anywhere. And that's why I believe that I will propose an amendment to this bill on a section for procurement. We'll not leave this to procurement laws. We'll make a provision on how we'll procure the materials to be used for this concern, Madam Speaker. We don't want people lying to us that we bought cement at Portland or we bought cement at Savannah and they're importing the cement. We will ensure that timber being used is bought locally. We'll ensure that everything being used in these programs are locally sourced. For me, Madam Speaker, those are things that I expect my colleagues to talk about. How do we ensure that this becomes one of the programs that are able to make sure that we get money through Buy Kenya, Build Kenya? Madam Speaker, I will not keep quiet. If we are going to be launching houses and we are importing cement, I will not keep quiet if we are going to be launching houses and we're importing timber. I will not keep quiet. You're going to be launching houses and we're importing steel. All this must be sourced locally for what the president has promised to come to fruition. Let's ensure that for once, Madam Speaker, we do this in a manner that creates jobs systematically. If we source timber locally, the timber industry grows. If you source cement locally, the cement industry grows. If you source steel locally, the steel industry grows. If you source the technology locally, you transfer that and the industries grow, Madam Speaker. That's what I would require to see happening. Madam Speaker, Kenyans are concerned about the possible favoritism in distribution of these houses and allocation. And that's why, Madam Speaker, we must have a proper system that does not involve human intervention. And I'm happy that this president and this government has decided that they're going to digitize things. Majority Leader, I want to request you, let's digitize the allocation of these houses. Let this not be about someone sitting somewhere and saying that so-and-so gets, so-and-so doesn't get. Let's have a way, even if it's a lottery or a coupon system, let's ensure that we avoid things that will make this not work, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the communities that are giving their lands, the communities giving their lands for these projects, Madam Speaker, must also be looked into. If you are building houses in Ugenya, you must tell us that out of these 100 houses, at least you put aside 20 for people from Ugenya. If you are building houses in Madare, you must ensure that we are providing 50% of these houses from Madare people, Madam Speaker. This is a serious project for the president. It must succeed. I don't succeed if there's discipline. If you follow the law to the letter in how we're going to implement this, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I've looked at who are represented in the board that is being proposed, Madam Speaker. And I'm going to again plead with the Majority Leader that in that board, we must have a person from the Juakali sector. In that board. In that board, get a person from from KEPSA, guys who sell these materials for construction. Let's not just have FKE and COTU. Let's have the Juakali sector who are supposed to benefit from this so that they also represent, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to plead with those doing these projects. We cannot be demolishing good houses to build better houses. We have to negotiate. You can't go to Kakamega, demolish houses that were built 2-3 days ago. Go to Bungoma, demolish houses that are built 2-3. These are, people have not done anything wrong. Talk to them. Agree with them that, yes, we want to build a bigger thing here. We can't allow Chinese to be building very serious things in Kileleshwa, interfering with their planning, and then you go to Bungoma, Kakamega, and demolish. Let's do this in a humane manner. Let's make this work for Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker, where Kenyans have concerns, let's address them, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to finish by saying this, that
30 seconds, wind up.
I've heard people talk about people contributing money and they'll not get housing. Madam Speaker, there are those who pay their taxes, which we use to pay school fees for our kids. They have no kids. There are those who pay their taxes, which we use to run the health system. They have not become sick. They are not going to, Madam Speaker. So an argument that because you're not going to get a house, you shouldn't be taxed, Madam Speaker, is wrong. There are people who have paid money for school fees and bursaries. They have no kids. So this is social housing. We as a country must carry each other along. We cannot say that because I can't pay for what I will not need. Madam Speaker, our humanity, our Ubuntu-ness, our belongingness requires that those who have help those who don't have acquire, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to wish the President well in this particular program and request Parliament that let's keep our eyes open. When our people give money for this project, it must be used for the right reason. Corruption must not be allowed in this project. Madam Speaker, I support and thank you.
Before we give the next person, allow me to interrupt the business of the House to order number 5 on papers. And honorable members, I will give a guide on the tabling of budget policy statement and medium-term debt management strategy for the financial year 2024-2025. Honorable members, this guide relates to the submission of 2024 budget policy statement and 2024 medium-term debt management strategy. As you may be aware, Section 25 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 requires the National Treasury to submit the budget policy statement, BPS, to Parliament by 15th February each year. In this regard, I wish to inform the House that in compliance with the said provisions of law, the Cabinet Secretary of the National Treasury for the National Treasury and Economic Planning has submitted the 2024 budget policy statement, the 2024 medium-term debt management strategy, and the attendant documents. Before permitting the leader of the majority party to lay the BPS and the debt strategy on the table of the House, allow me to guide the House on the next steps to be taken. Honorable members, Standing Orders 232, 5 and 7 provides as follows, and I quote. Number 5, upon being laid before the House, the budget policy statement shall stand committed to each departmental committee to consider and make recommendations to the Budget and Appropriation Committee within 7 days of committal. 7, within 14 days following the tabling of the budget policy statement, the Budget and Appropriation Committee shall table a report in the House for consideration in accordance with the provisions of Section 25(7) of the Public Finance Management Act. It is therefore expected that immediately upon being laid, departmental committees will forthwith commence consideration of the BPS in accordance with their respective mandates and submit their reports to the Budget and Appropriation Committee. Thereafter, the Budget and Appropriation Committee will table its report on the BPS to the House within the set timelines. Honorable members, order, Honorable Opio. Honorable members, I also wish to remind the House that the consideration of the BPS ought to be preceded by consideration of the debt management strategy. Of note, a resolution of the House on the debt management strategy sets the appropriate limit on proposed domestic and foreign borrowing for the next financial year. For clarity, Standing Order 232A, 4 and 6 provides that, 4, within 10 days following the tabling of the debt management strategy, the Public Debt and Privatization Committee shall table a report in the House for consideration. 6, the House shall consider the report of the Public Debt and Privatization Committee on the debt management strategy before considering the report for the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the budget policy statement. I therefore urge the Public Debt and Privatization Committee to expedite consideration of the 2024 debt management strategy in order to clear the way for the consideration of the BPS. I will now allow the leader of the majority party to lay the 2024 budget policy statement and debt management strategy. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, February 15, 2024. 1, the budget policy statement. 2, the 2024 medium-term debt management strategy. 3, the medium-term revenue strategy for the financial year 2024-2025, financial year 2026-2027, and 4, the 2024 budget policy statement, non-financial indicators for the financial year 2024-2025, and the medium term. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Asante. Zamu inayofuata mbunge wa Mombasa, Mheshimiwa Zamzam.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika. Na mimi niweze kuchangia mjadala wa leo. Mheshimiwa Spika, pesa ambazo zinakusanywa kwa wananchi, leo nimepata kuelewa kuwa ni bilioni 63 ambazo zimekusanywa kwa housing levy. Hizi pesa kwanza, mahakama ilivyobandua mambo ya housing levy, hizi pesa zinafaa zirejeshwe kwanza kwa wananchi mpaka vile mahakama itakapoamua. Nafikia wamepeleka rufaa, tuelewe kuwa itakuwa namna gani. Mheshimiwa Spika, nyumba zimejengwa hata Mombasa, tumeona watu wakatolewa katika nyumba zao Pakistan, wakaambiwa nyinyi ambao ni maskini, nyumba zikijengwa hapa mtakuwa nyinyi wa kwanza kupawa hizi nyumba. Mheshimiwa Spika, mpaka leo wakazi wa Pakistan nyumba zimetimia, na mimi nilisikia yule ambaye alikuwa amepewa hii contract akisema kuwa mikono yake imefungwa. Aliomba kabisa, nikisikia na masikio yangu, akawa anaomba, nasema basi tuwape hawa watu waliotoka katika hizi nyumba, tuwape kwanza nafasi ya kuingia. Hawakuweza kuregeshwa pale. Mheshimiwa Spika, nyumba zile zauzwa milioni 7, milioni 5. Mheshimiwa Spika, tusifanye mambo ya danganya toto. Ukaweza kumdanganya mama mboga na yule muuza viazi na yule mwenye kusukuma mkokoteni kuwa hizi nyumba zitakuwa nyumba zao Mheshimiwa Spika, kumbe tunawahadaa wananchi. Mheshimiwa Spika, mambo ya ujenzi wa nyumba nafikiri yalianza kule mwanzo. Hata wakati wa Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta aliweza kufanya sehemu hapa upande wa Kibera, upande huu mwingine. Lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi nataka nimpongeze Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta kwa sababu watu walioingia pale ni wale watu waliokuwa wametoka katika yale manyumba wakati yanabomolewa. Na wakapewa hizo nyumba, wanalipa 2,500, 3,000 mpaka watakapomaliza wachukue zile nyumba. Lakini kwa sasa mambo yanaendelea ni hujuma Mheshimiwa Spika. Nyumba za bomolewa, kwa mfano juzi wamebomolea watu wa Changamwe zile nyumba. Lakini hata ile notice, tunajua pengine nyumba zingine ni za kwao. Hata ile notice pia kupatia mwananchi imekuwa ni ngumu Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi ningependa kiongozi wa wengi alioleta mjadala huu atuelezee huyu mama mboga, huyu bodaboda anashinikizwa vipi ndani ya mambo ya housing levy wakati ambapo hayuko kazini. Wale ambao wanafanya kazi ndio ambao wanakatwa hizi pesa. Je, huyu mama mboga ataingizwa vipi pale? Aweze kutuelezea hapa Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni dhahiri kuwa wafanyakazi wa serikali wengi walikuwa wamechukua pesa ili kuweza kuchukua loan kuweza kujenga zile nyumba zao, na wana manyumba yao tayari. Ni dhulma kubwa wao kukatwa sasa tena pesa za housing levy wakati ambapo yale mapeni hawawezi wakatumia wao. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, serikali na mashamba mengi sana. Hata pia wananchi pia wengine maskini wana mashamba yao Mheshimiwa Spika. Kama serikali kweli inataka kujengea mwananchi nyumba, mbona wale ambao wanakaa kwenye nyumba ya matope katika mashamba yao wasiende kule wakawajengea nyumba za kisasa? Wawaambie sasa mtakuwa mwalipa 2,200 mpaka mmalize, lakini muwe katika nyumba ambao ziko thabiti Mheshimiwa Spika. Lakini yale ambao tunaweza kushuhudia ni uvunjaji wa majumba, kunyang'anya watu mashamba yao, kudhalilisha Wakenya. Wakenya wanalia huku nje Mheshimiwa Spika. Na mimi nataka niulize swali moja tu. Kwa sasa Kenya ina deni ya trilioni 11. Na tumemsikia juzi Mheshimiwa Rais akisema kuwa madeni yamekuwa mengi, kulipa inakuwa mtihani. Wewe una deni linalokusumbua. Kwa nini uchukue pesa tena uende kuweka kwa vitu ambavyo Wakenya hata hawana haja nazo? Wakenya wakipiga kura walitoka ndani ya majumba yao, hawakutoka msituni Mheshimiwa Spika. Haya mapeni ambayo anachukua kujengea majumba Mheshimiwa Spika, alipe deni tumuelewe, anachukua lakini analipa deni Mheshimiwa Spika. Sio madeni yanazidi kukua, wananchi wanalia, pesa zao zinakatwa. Kwanza ile fuel levy 16%, hiyo ilikuwa inatosha kufanya haya mambo yote kwa sababu alikuwa ameenda extreme. Mheshimiwa Spika, tusizungushane huku na huku 10 kibaten Mheshimiwa Spika. Wakenya wamechoka na goji kiriba goji Mheshimiwa Spika. Wakenya wanataka Mheshimiwa Rais aweze kuongeza production Mheshimiwa Spika. Ukiweza kuingia kwa mshahara wa wananchi, mwenyewe wana madeni chungu nzima.
Haya, kiongozi wa walio wengi ako na hoja ya nidhamu.
Asante Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, kwa hoja ya nidhamu, najua kuna mswada wa kuongea mambo ambayo kwa lugha ya Kimombo tunasema relevance. Na nasikia mheshimiwa yale mambo yanayohusu hoja iliyomo mbele yetu. Nimesikia mheshimiwa Zamzam akiongelea fuel levy, na kwa mambo ya manyumba sijui fuel levy ni gani hiyo. Labda mheshimiwa Zamzam atuelezee hii fuel levy ni gani. Nimesikia akiongea mambo ya order za koti ambazo ziko Changamwe ambazo hazihusu mswada. Madam Speaker, naomba tu mjulishe mheshimiwa Zamzam.
Patia mheshimiwa Zamzam dakika moja atakujuza.
Mheshimiwa,
umetaja kodi tofauti.
Mheshimiwa kiongozi wa wengi, ikiwa mwalimu alikuwa anafunza darasani na huku muelewa, hiyo si shauri yangu. Yule mzazi wako alokulipia school fees atakuuliza ukifika nyumbani Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, hizi zote ni ushuru zinazokatwa wananchi. Kitu ninachosema, kwa nini uongeze ushuru mwingine katika ushuru ambao ulishakata zamani? Tumia ule ushuru uliokata 16%, fanya haya mazagazaga yote ambao wataka kufanya. kwa sababu Wakenya tayari washadhulumika katika ile 16%. Kwa nini tuje tuwafinye tena na housing levy wakati hata bodaboda hajui mambo ya mshahara ni nini, mama mboga hajui mshahara ni kitu gani? Maskini ya Mungu, nimeona wameingia mpaka vibanda, sijui itakuwaje Kenya. Ukitaka serikali ama taifa lako liende kwa uthabiti, Mheshimiwa Spika, punguza ushuru, zidisha mazao. Ukizidisha mazao, Wakenya watakuwa na furaha ya kukatwa ushuru, Mheshimiwa Spika. Na mimi napenda kuelezea wenzangu mlioko upande ule. Najua wengine pengine wana shida zao nyingi. Na mpaka wanakuwa kama vile wajua maiti akiwa na inzi umfeta mpaka kaburini. Mimi nataka kuambia, mutaogopa pengine zile shida zenu mlizonazo, mwataka msaidiwe kule juu. Lakini mkirudi kule chini kwa wananchi, mutapigwa makatafunua, mutaenda kulilia na shida zenu kule chini. Ni wakati jumba hili lisimame na wananchi wa Kenya. Ni wakati jumba hili liweke misingi thabiti ya kuweza mtetea mwananchi wa kawaida. Ni wakati jumba hili, uko kwenye serikali, uko kwenye upinzani, lakini simama na watu wako. Mwambie rais, hii housing levy imezidi sana, Mheshimiwa Rais. Tunakuomba basi ile ulochukua ile 16%, fanya huko maneno yako, lakini haya mengine jamani, mhurumie mwananchi wa kawaida. Kila mahali, Mheshimiwa Spika, ukiona kiongozi wa taifa anakwenda kila mahali kisha anazomwa, si ishara nzuri, Mheshimiwa Spika. Ni ishara kuwa Wakenya wamechoka. Ni ishara kuwa Wakenya wanahangaika, Mheshimiwa Spika. Na mimi sisemi kwa kuchukia, nasema kwa kutengeza. Kwa sababu leo kesho Mheshimiwa Rais akienda kukaa kando peke yake, atasema Mama Zamzam alisema ukweli, nyinyi wenzangu ndio mnaonidanganya, mnazidi kundidimiza, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi naongea kama mama ambaye niliweza kuuza sambusa, naongea kama mama ambaye niliweza kufanya kazi kama housekeeper kule Saudi Arabia, Mheshimiwa Spika. Sisi hatujui mambo ya mshahara, kukatwa housing levy, hatujui kuendaje. Kwa hiyo wasitumie majina ya mama mboga, wakatumia majina ya mvuta mkokoteni kudhulumu wale wafanyakazi ambao tayari katika mishahara yao wakati mwingine inasoma zero salary. Mheshimiwa Spika, wananchi na wabunge wenzangu, mwambieni rais ukweli. Mambo enda yombo, mambo kangaja, huenda yakaja. Kenya yadidimia. Musiingize president mahali pabaya, waheshimiwa wenzangu. Hii mambo imekwisha hapa. Hatuoni mama mboga, hatuoni mvuta mkokoteni, tunaona daktari anayedhulumiwa, tunaona mwalimu anayedhulumiwa, tunaona Wakenya wanaodhulumiwa na wanasikia uchungu. Na waombeni, mambo ya housing levy imekataliwa kotini. Jamani, mengine tukubali yaishe. Koti kishasema, mlivyopewa uongozi sisi tulikubali akaisha. Na sasa hii housing levy imekataliwa, kubalini yaishe, tuweze kujenga Kenya kwa furaha na upendo bila tax nyingi. Asante sana, Mheshimiwa Spika.
Aya, asante. Nafasi hii mwende Mheshimiwa Paul Nzengu, mbunge wa Mwingi Kaskazini.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. From the onset, I want to say that I have some issues with this bill. First, because I think the way it has been structured and the living that has been incorporated in this bill are not supposed to be levies as such, but I think it shouldn't be money that is contributed to a trust or to a fund in the same manner that NSSF is contributed, so that once you've done contribution over years, you can be able to claim back your contribution either in the form of a house or in the form of the savings, just like NSSF does. Because then the question goes, then if we are going to contribute monies and then people are going to apply for loans, these loans are going to be paid back. These loans are going to be paid back. What happens to the initial capital that has been contributed? Does it mean that the government will then divert that money to some other uses? That is not being informed by this bill. So I think I want to ask the proponents of this bill to look into that. Madam Speaker, I am aware that small business people are going to close down, because then already they are struggling to pay the salaries, and now a burden has been added onto them to match the levy for the employees. Already people are struggling with the burden of paying that small salary that they have been paying, and now an extra 1.5% has been incorporated. So that means an increase into the salary that they are paying. The other issue, Madam Speaker, is on the issue of the eligibility to access to this housing. For example, when you go to the definition, the social housing unit with a plinth of that much, it's targeted a person whose monthly income is below 20,000. I'm wondering where in Kenya, when you have an income of 20,000, how you can save money enough to be able to pay a loan for a house. Those houses, the cheapest is going for around maybe 2.5 million, almost 3 million. How many years will it take for someone who has an income of 20,000, which income has to be distributed between competing needs of the family, including food and other basic needs? Madam Speaker, I want to go very fast to the board. The board is constituted to be able to distribute money to different groups of different implementers of the objective of the bill. The board is supposed to give 30% to National Housing Corporation, supposed to give 30% to Kenya Slum Upgrading and Low-Cost Housing and Infrastructure Trust Fund. It's supposed to give 36% to the Ministry of Housing, and then 2% goes to the collector, who in this case is KRA, and the administrator in this case, who is the board. Now I'm wondering, how is the board going to be able to even coordinate and control all these huge amounts of money that are going to be given to different bodies of government? And then all these bodies have got an administrative arm in their component as they implement the project. Why then do we duplicate administrative cost in 4 different bodies of government when this money should have just been, if that happens? Because of course I oppose, but I know the tyranny of numbers will play against me. But even when that happens, why don't we have a centralized way of just remitting the money direct from Treasury to the implementers? Why do we have to break it down into 3 different implementing agencies? And that is also going to impact on the cost of implementing the project. Madam Speaker, I want to take you to the CEO, the qualification of the CEO, which is clause number 21. If you read clause number 21(2), a person qualifies to be appointed as a chief executive officer if that person has at least 10 years experience in managerial capacity in affordable housing matters, finance, investment, or banking sector. I'm wondering why this has been deliberately left amorphous. Because before you have experience, you must have requisite academic qualification. And therefore, if we are talking about a CEO of a technical organization, that CEO must be a technical person. In this case, must be an engineer, must be an architect, must be a building economist, so that you understand what is involved in building. Buildings have components like foundation. All buildings are based on a strong foundation. And if you give a quirk, because you know when you say that is only experience that is required, there is no academic qualifications that are preferred, then what we are saying is that anyone who has experience does not necessarily have to have an academic qualification. Then it means that you can employ anyone as long as they have been managers. They could have been managing a brewing company or managing a hotel or club, whatever it may be. So I think, Madam Speaker, I want to say that if this will happen, that we are going to go ahead and pass this bill, the qualification of the CEO must be a technical person who has technical qualification over and above experience. And I want to refer you to the section on corporate secretary, for example, on clause number 26(1). There shall be a corporate secretary to the board who shall be competitively recruited and appointed by the board A person shall be qualified to be appointed as a corporate secretary if that person holds a degree from a university recognized in Kenya. So why are we silent on this qualification on the matter of the CEO? I think I'm clear on that one. And then, Madam Speaker, I will go to the question of eligibility. On eligibility, for example, in clause number 31, 2D, on the eligibility, there are, apart from all what they have said above there, such other information as may be determined by the relevant agency. Why are we leaving the agencies to be the one to determine? If we have a criteria of how people should qualify to benefit from this fund, then the criteria need to be set out in this bill so that we don't leave it open for abuse by the relevant agencies that have been mentioned here. Madam Speaker, I submit. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Kasarani.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And from the onset, I rise to support the Affordable Housing Bill. And as I rise to support, I want to just make it known to the House that this is actually the first time you are hearing my voice. And I'm going to stick to the subject at hand, even though this is supposed to be my maiden speech. So I want to remind all the honorable members that I was elected as an independent candidate. Why I bring that up is because I did not have the luxury of having a national manifesto. But I read both manifestos from Kenya Kwanza and from Azimio. Both manifestos agreed on the need for housing. They agreed that it is a fundamental human right. They agreed on the rate of population growth and the migration to the urban centers. And they agreed that in Kenya we require approximately 250,000 new units per year. So there are two things that we must recognize from this fact. Kenyans agree that there's a need for housing. The question is on how this is going to be implemented. I also happened to be in the housing committee, and we went around the country, and I must say that must have been the most advanced public participation exercise I have seen. Kenyans agree that there's a need for housing. The place where there's divergence is on several issues which can be cured and are already being cured by amendments to this particular bill. The first issue was the affordability of these houses. And most Kenyans really lamented on the fact that there was a deposit that was required to actually get access to the particular houses. That has already been cured in the amendments. And that's why I beg honorable members to please go through the committee report, because most of the issues that are being raised today have been addressed in that report. Most of the other issues on allocation of the units, fairness in allocation, and job creation have been cured again with amendments. How have these been cured? It is by ensuring that wherever these units are constructed, they benefit that local community. All those things have been addressed by amendments based on the public participation exercise that was carried out by the Joint Committee. I think the issue that arises for most people are purely speculative. Why I say that is that in Kenya we have a culture of public funds being stolen. But I think, Madam Speaker, we have to get to a point as a country where we have faith that some development is actually going to happen. Otherwise, we will remain in the same state, because we are now 60 years after independence. We have not been able to achieve Article 43 of the Constitution and ensuring Kenyans live in dignity. It is about time that as a House we rise up and support to ensure that at least within the 13th Parliament, some of the things we support, we can be proud later on and say we have eradicated some of the issues that have persisted since before some of us were born. The purpose of this particular bill, even though it's tackling only housing, some people are saying we should ensure, first of all, that people have adequate food, people have jobs. But in terms of social and economic rights, they must all be achieved simultaneously. We cannot say, since not everybody has a house, then they don't go to school, because everybody, all our children need to go to school. Education is also a socio-economic right. And therefore, we must strive and achieve all those rights at the same time. So we are already 60 years too late, Madam Speaker. And one of the things that we must ensure as members of this House, instead of opposing the bill, is bringing forth amendments of what we think should be changed. But both Azimio, Kenya Kwanza, and the people of Kenya agree that we need housing and there's a problem with housing. The public participation that we went through as a country, and everybody was watching, the number of jobs that have already been created on the sites that the affordable housing units are already taking place has not been seen before. I had one of the members say that we don't need these labor jobs, or we don't need temporary jobs. We need all jobs. My people in Kasarani need these jobs. I have to advocate for this housing because we have a lot of people who live in rural areas who come to Nairobi to look for these jobs. They have nowhere to stay. It is a duty of the government to ensure that whether it's rental or it's houses that people can buy, they have access to affordable housing. I rise to support, Madam Speaker, and I submit. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Funyula, Honorable Oundo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to lend a voice on this very controversial and emotive subject of affordable housing. Honorable Speaker, when you look at the housing policy, sessional paper on the housing policy of 2015 of the Republic of Kenya, it's very clear on the need of housing. And indeed, when you read deeper, the definition of housing has never been a universal definition. Even when you look at the UN Habitat resolutions, the definitions of housing has never been uniform and, cross-cutting. Each community, each family, each society has got its own definition of housing. So that's the first point. That's the first point. That's the first failure or shortcoming of this particular bill. It assumes that the definition of a house for somebody in Limuru is the same for definition of a house for somebody from Wajir. That is the first point. We seem to be, it makes many of us believe that this particular bill is not about housing. It's about politics. It's about short-term gains. It's about things that do not add any value to the people of Kenya in totality. Honorable Speaker, I want to disclose here, I was one of the first MPs to submit the site for affordable housing. There are indications that they are coming to do those affordable housing in my constituency. And when I told my people on the ground in Funyula constituency, they have mocked me for the last 3 weeks, non-stop, on how misguided, misdirected, and mispriority. So that's the first issue we need to address. Honorable Speaker, the committee has talked eloquently how they did public participation all over the country and where there was unanimity that this bill is good. They have talked about there are going to be amendments raised by the committee. And we want this to be the test case so that public participation should not just for the sake of public participation. Public participation should not be a farce. Public participation should not be window dressing. We would have imagined, I've not had the opportunity to read the report, but I would have imagined that in the report they have a matrix on what the people said in each particular center they went for public participation. How they have synthesized those comments and submissions, and how have they arrived at whatever amendments they wish to make to this particular bill so that we truly reflect the spirit of public participation. It's a terrible waste of public funds for us members of parliament to go all over the country. We listen to the people talk, and then we come using as some invincible force, invincible hand somewhere, we overturn the will and expectation of the people of Kenya. It's unconstitutional, it is immoral, it's unfair, and it's abuse of the office that has been conferred upon us. Honorable Speaker, they need to be very honest. There is a lot of concerns regarding this particular bill. The first one, and which has been the bone of contention, is the source of the funds to implement the housing, the affordable housing, social housing, affordable market housing, whatever definition you give it. The issue of the housing levy, it has been a bone of contention, and the courts of law have pronounced themselves in respect to that matter. Trying to cure the issues raised by the court of law by including clause 4, 2B, whereby we are talking now to look for other incomes. Honorable Speaker, we are just misleading the nation. We are just covering our heads in the sand. One, Honorable Speaker, the principle of taxation is that the cost of collecting and administering the tax must not be too high to an extent the tax collected, it becomes less useful, becomes not useful. Honorable Speaker, I do not know what mechanism will the KRA, the collector, use to collect the levy or any contribution from a Mamboga, from Modaboda's rider, the sale of illicit brews, any typical merchant who sells cereals, they are bedders in most of the communities where we come from. How will the cost of collecting that tax and administering that tax will simply, KRA will abandon that line of income and only concentrate on salaried people and those in formal employment. We are again going back to the discriminatory nature of the funds that have been, that was the basis of the court case. We have not thought about it. As the minority leader has stated, what is the hurry? What's the hurry? We want housing. There's no doubt about it. Any Kenyan you ask, even those ones who live in Lavington, would want to upgrade to go to Muthaiga. Even those who live in South Sea would want to upgrade to go somewhere else. There's no doubt about it. But it's the modality of getting the housing. Honorable Speaker, and we'll move this amendment, and as usual, we will let the tyrant of numbers carry their day. We need, Honorable Speaker, there is an attempt to cure the problem, and that is clause 38 of the bill. Clause 38 of the bill. Which says an eligible person may make voluntary savings with an agent for purposes of raising a deposit towards the allocation of an affordable housing unit. That is where the solution lies. Housing is personal. It might never be a priority to everybody. Many of our children will prefer hovering around our houses, even as they approach 30, as they look to buy cars or to invest in the stock exchange. Many of us will get married. A man will move to a woman's house. You might do not need the house that you had until the day another competitor of the house comes to kick you out, which happens quite often. So, Honorable Speaker, I want to urge the majority side. Let's look at this thing from both a policy prescription point of view and realistic point of view, Honorable Speaker. Because at the end of the day, we are going to punish. Honorable Speaker, as I speak here, the reason I've stayed here all this long, and that's why I came here early, I have had several messages, especially from the teachers of this country. I have several messages from typical employed people who are low-income earners that are already suffering, Honorable Speaker. Many of them are now going into negative pay slips. They had thought the relief that came from the courts who's going to help them solve their problems. Some have already committed, Honorable Speaker, continuing to impose the tax as it is at this level. It's punitive, it is unfair, and we want to tell the government, no country has ever developed by overtaxation. No country will ever progress by heavily taxing a common mwananchi. We can still do housing, Honorable Speaker, affordable housing, institutional housing. We look for seed capital, be it 70 billion, be it 100 billion, we can float a housing bond. We have gotten money through Eurobond. The sovereign rating of the country is still good. We can raise that kind of money. So that becomes a sinking fund. In any case, Honorable Speaker, housing demand oscillates from one period to another. There is no guarantee that all the houses that we are rushing to produce, to dump into the market, will be uptaken, will be absorbed at a go. That's a fallacy. There's no economic theory supports that kind of argument. Honorable Speaker, it is important that we look at this bill soberly, devoid of partisan politics, and present to the people of Kenya something that they will always look at the 13th Parliament and look at it with posterity. The other technical issues, Honorable Speaker, are immaterial. They are minor. They can be resolved. The elephant in the house is the definition of the house, and secondly, the way of raising funds for the housing, affordable housing schemes. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Malava, Honorable Moses Injebi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also arise, Madam Speaker, to support this bill and thank the majority leader for actually coming up with this bill. Madam Speaker, personally, I'm so happy that I'm learning actually today that Azmio equally had in its manifesto the issue of affordable housing, which also Kenya Kwanza was having. Madam Speaker, what surprises me at this moment is why a member from this particular side of government, Parliament, can actually claim now that this affordable housing is not a need for Kenyans presently, and yet it was in their manifesto.
Majority Leader, what is out of order?
Speaker, I don't want to interrupt the Honorable Ijendi, but you can hear the laughter that is coming from the Honorable Atandi. He's laughing like someone who is in a bar, not in the house, and disrupting everybody. We can't even hear what the Honorable Ijendi is contributing.
Order, Majority
Maybe
Leader.
you could ask Atandi if he's not keen on listening to Ijendi to allow us to listen to him.
Order, Majority Leader, but Honorable Atandi has heard you in the Kamukunji there. Let us consult in low tones. Continue, Honorable Member for Malava.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I think what most of us have to look at is those of us who have an advantage of having a salary is really to consider our brothers and sisters who do not have any income and who are suffering in terms of living conditions. Madam Speaker, I remember when I began working, it was so difficult to get a house in Nairobi here because of the kind of cost that was being asked for in terms of rent. And Madam Speaker, I would visit some of my colleagues who had gotten jobs, and the kind of places they were staying in were so deplorable. So, Madam Speaker, I want to appeal to everyone in the country, particularly who is salaried, to just accept that for the income he is having, he is standing in an advantaged position where he can actually raise some money, just like we are raising money through payee, so that we can get houses that can actually cause our brothers and sisters to also live a decent life in Nairobi. Madam Speaker, what I'm also seeing, I'm coming from a rural area. My constituency is in a rural area. But when you see what's happening, we are basically an agricultural constituency. Most of the farms currently are now being subdivided further and further to put up houses for the children in the home. And you find that this is affecting now farming. I believe with this kind of housing, if it takes root in the urban areas to solve the problem of living conditions in urban areas, then it also extends, for example, to a rural place like mine, then have also affordable housing in my town, Malava. I would expect in future now, these children in these families traditionally who have to inherit land from their parents, they can actually get houses in urban areas and leave farms for agricultural farming. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, I would really support this, that and every one of us, because after all, as Mio and Kenya Kwanza were having this, is only to support this, and if there are a few amendments, we make the amendments. However, Madam Speaker, when I look at clause 4 of this bill, paragraph 2A, it says, when it comes to this levy, it shall be at the rate of 1.5%. And this A, it says gross salary of an employee or the gross income of a person received or accrued, which is not subject to the levy under paragraph A. Now, Madam Speaker, my only question is this. Supposing as an employee I have a salary of 100,000 per month, and then I've managed to develop a business whereby I'm earning almost 500,000 every month. Madam Speaker, who decides what to be levied? Who decides? Do they levy my salary or do they levy my other incomes? I think I would want that this bill can come clear on this, that it is me to decide or it is KRA to decide which one to levy. Madam Speaker, also, on the issue of penalty, that's clause 7. Madam Speaker, I'm finding this a bit punitive, that on the 9th day of the following month, if this money is not remitted, then there is a penalty of 3% of the unpaid amount. Madam Speaker, we know what Kenya is going through when it comes to salary payment. Even our own staff here in Parliament, sometimes there is also a delay in salary disbursements. So, Madam Speaker, I think we can look at this and not become so punitive as it is. Madam Speaker, finally, some persons were asking, why are we paying this money and yet we have an investor who is coming in, given land, develop, then finally we pay for it. But I've found an answer in clause 10, and which I would like Kenyans to know, which addresses this particular issue. This particular levy we are paying is to help those Kenyans who are not in a position to get money, to get some soft loans at low interest rate, where it can be even at 1%, so that they can actually acquire this particular loan and pay for this particular house. I'm also finding some comfort with this because finally, when this money, Madam Speaker, my brother here makes a lot of noise. I don't know how he was in his Form 4. Madam Speaker, also, I'm also happy with this bill because I'm also realizing that apart from the house itself, developing a house, is that this levy will also be used, the fund. The money will be used also to upgrade slums, to maintain, to do maintenance in slums, because, Madam Speaker, you get into some of these slums, they have no roads, they have no facilities like toilets. So I'm happy that this money will be coming from us who are able to help those particular slums, to improve those slums, so that people who are living in such kind of places, they can actually live a decent living. So otherwise, Madam Speaker, I support this bill 100%.
Honorable Member for Alego Usonga, Honorable Atandi.
Finally, Madam Speaker, let me begin by saying that I oppose this bill in total. And Madam Speaker, let me say that according to my understanding, the reason why this bill is here was primarily to correct the issues that were raised by the courts on the unconstitutionality of the affordable housing levy. But, Madam Speaker, this bill does not attempt to address those matters raised by the courts. For example, On the fact that housing is a devolved function, the bill merely mentions counties. It does not say anything much. The bill talks about, the only area where the bill is involving counties is where the Affordable Housing Board is formed. And in this board, Council of Governors is supposed to nominate one person into this board. That is the only area where counties are mentioned. On the allocation of funds, counties is not involved. There's nowhere where counties will be involved in implementing these projects. So, Madam Speaker, according to me, the bill still remains unconstitutional because that issue is not addressed. The other issue which I wanted to talk about is that most of my colleagues who have spoken from the other side are saying that this bill is supposed to answer the question of job creation, that these houses will give us jobs. Madam Speaker, this is the biggest fallacy and hypocrisy of the affordable housing theory. Because, Madam Speaker, I don't know where these jobs will be found. What I have seen going on in the country is that there are a few gray, yellow, and brown men from China and Turkey who are implementing these projects. I've not seen anywhere where Kenyans are going to be used to do these plots. In fact, Madam Speaker, the truth of the matter is that the motive of this affordable housing has not been really revealed to Kenyans. Kenyans don't understand what these all houses are all about. So, Madam Speaker, if the regime wanted to use this affordable housing program to create jobs for Kenyans, then they would have used another model. They would have used, for example, labor-based approach to development of housing, like what I have seen happening in Rwanda. Rwanda, when they build houses, they use locals. They only get experts. And they don't have to hire foreigners, to come and build houses, and then Kenyans become laborers. Madam Speaker, we cannot sit here and pass a policy or a law that will make Kenyans laborers to Chinese. And then we are busy shouting and saying we are creating jobs. Madam Speaker, the last time I checked, when the president was commissioning some of these projects, I saw hungry-looking Kenyans, on those sites. I don't even think they are even paid. You know how colonialism is being used, is going to apply in this affordable housing. Madam Speaker, let us get serious. Let us stop this argument that these things are going to give Kenyans jobs. If you are going to ask Kenyans to go to these mjengos and earn 100 shillings per day, and then you are a president shouting and saying, I'm creating jobs. Madam Speaker, this is the biggest fallacy that this House should never entertain. The other issue, Madam Speaker, that I want to talk about is the part 3, which is talking about the affordable housing levy. Madam Speaker, affordable housing levy in this section, employed Kenyans are supposed to pay 1.5% of their gross salary into this fund. I have not seen anywhere where unemployed other Kenyans who are not in employment are also paying. It's not here. Or if it is there, I should be shown. Because my understanding of the court decision was that this affordable housing was discriminatory because only employed Kenyans were supposed to pay into it. But how are you correcting that? Because you are still asking only employed Kenyans to pay. And Madam Speaker, all the employed Kenyans have spoken. They have said they don't have additional extra income to support this program. So if the people who are supposed to pay for it are saying no, why is this autocratic bill being implemented, being forced down the throats of Kenyans? Madam Speaker, I oppose this bill because it is forcing employed Kenyans to pay for something which they don't need. Personally, I don't need this thing. I'm employed. Many other people in my family are employed. They don't need this thing. So, Madam Speaker, this is an autocracy. This is dictatorship. And this House should never allow itself to be used to pass dictatorship policies. The other issue that I wanted to raise, Madam Speaker, is that Kenyans, it is true Kenyans may want houses. They may want affordable houses. But is it the most important priority? Because as a House, we need to, pass policies and laws that Kenyans want as a priority. In my view, I don't think this is a priority. Some people have sat somewhere and they've decided that we need to collect resources from Kenya, build houses and eat. In the end, Madam Speaker, this is going to be the biggest scandal in the history of Kenya. Bigger than Goldenberg, bigger than Eurobond, where the monies were borrowed and they never reached here. When Auditor General Ouko said that the Eurobond funds were stolen, some people didn't accept and didn't agree. I want to predict that this affordable housing is the biggest scandal, and it is meant to benefit a few people in State House. This is a fact which must be highlighted. And therefore, I want to stand with Kenyans and say that this is something that Kenyans must reject. We must reject it. And Madam Speaker, the MP for Mombasa, Madam Zamzam, should go into the records of history of this House as the most eloquent speaker on this matter. And that if you were not persuaded by the speech by Madam Zamzam, then you need to check yourself. Madam Speaker, there are certain aspects of this bill which I wanted to support. But after Madam Zamzam made her contribution, I am now opposing the bill in totality. Even my colleagues from that side, the Honorable Ichungwa could not sustain a point of order against her speech. So Madam Speaker, let this House make a resolution that this is not something that Kenyans need, and that all of us need to oppose it because it is good for Kenyans not to be involved in supporting corruption by a few elements in government. Madam Speaker, I oppose.
Thank you, Honorable Irene Mayaka.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to also add my voice to this particular bill, which I want to go on record that I oppose in totality. And Honorable Speaker, point number one, buying or purchasing a home is a very personal matter. And we need to understand that this is very personal. Honorable Speaker, this is like when you want to buy a bra. Because unlike when you want to buy a bra, when you want to buy other clothes, you can take them for fitting. You cannot do that to a bra. You are either size 38B or a size 34B. That is how personal it is when you're buying a home. Because it is said in this bill in Part 1, Sub-Article 3, that it gives effect to Article 43 of the Constitution in terms of accessibility and adequacy. When you're talking about the matter of adequacy, and you tell an individual who is used to living with 50 people in the same boma, that now you're going to live in a house, a one-bedroom house. How is this being adequate to the needs of the people? Madam Speaker, when you look at the pay slips of Kenyans, majority of the people who are working, they have already been deducted mortgage, they're being deducted all these other deductions, and then you're adding the housing levy, and yet that house, they will not necessarily own it. Honorable Speaker, we had the new Speaker. You told us about the fact that we get deducted VAT, and some people are deducted VAT even if they don't have children. But I would like to educate you that VAT is a deduction that goes into a wider basket. Housing levy is specific. It goes into a specific levy, and therefore you cannot compare the two. That is like comparing a tomato to a potato. It doesn't work like that. Honorable Speaker, I'd just like to give you a comparative analysis of other countries. We've had housing levy in Finland, in Italy, in South Korea, and in all these countries, which are more developed than we are, they've actually had to review how housing levy is being administered. In South Korea, for example, right now, the government is buying houses from private investors and then subsidizing them and then leasing them out to individuals. Secondly, in a place like Finland and Italy, people are advised to rent to own. So you're deducted money, yes, from your salary, but that money goes towards a home that you're already staying in. So you're renting to own to eventually own that home. That is not what we are working with in this country. Speaker, I'd also like to just look at Part 2 of subsection 7, where it talks about that one will be able to pay a penalty upon delays. Right now, we all know that we have delays in salaries, even for civil servants. Even NGCDF has not come through because the government says there's no money. So is the government going to actually deduct itself on these penalties if it fails to pay the civil servants on time? Is it going to penalize itself? Is that what is going to happen? Honorable Speaker, and I just want to say this, and this is because in clause 30 and 31, we have a very scanty criteria. You cannot tell me that for me to own a house, I have first to be a citizen of Kenya who is 18 years. Okay, so imagine a scenario where a couple of citizens of this country go to a place like Ngara and say they want those homes because according to the criteria on the bill, they qualify. They are Kenyans, they are 18 years old, so they qualify. What are you going to tell those Kenyans? Mr. Speaker, back at home in Nyamira, where they want to, like for example, have affordable housing in the town. For us who come from the Nyanza region, and maybe in Western Kenya, owning a home means you have a compound, it has goats there, iko na ng'ombe, it has a space. That is owning a home. You cannot tell a Kisii that they own a home by having a flat, some space up there in town in Nyamira. And you imagine that the people back at home, the elders, will respect you and say that you own a home. We need to tailor-make these solutions to people depending on where they live. If it's people who are in the villages, do not tell them about housing levy. If it's people in Garissa whose children are reading under trees, you cannot tell me you want to build for me a house, and yet my children are reading under the tree. That is a government that lacks priorities. Honorable Speaker, as I finish, I just want to ask this question. Because I was nominated by my political party to represent workers in this assembly, I just want to ask, now that the courts declared housing levy unconstitutional, the workers who had been deducted, can they get their refunds? And the reason why I'm saying this is because even if, at the very worst, this is passed and it is declared constitutional, you cannot apply law in ultra vires. You cannot apply the law in reverse. Therefore, for all that time that Kenyans have been deducted this money, tafadhali turudishie wa Kenya pesa yao. I thank you.
Thank you. Next on the board. Now, I'm told the member for Homa Bay had her card malfunction, so this will go to her. Just give her the microphone where she is.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And I believe the ICT personnel will all be reviewing our gadgets before we come into sessions so that I'm not experiencing frustration, which I've experienced for the last 4.5 hours. But I thank you for understanding. Now, when I read through this proposed bill, actually all the schedules have gaps, and I would say that I support it is a total scam. And I want to start by saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this is a bill that as legislators in this House, we must stand to oppose until we are convinced beyond reasonable doubts in terms of implementation. A good proposal, which even Azimio had in the manifesto, as our minority leader stated. I want to say and talk from the perspective of a project planner. And I want to dismiss instantly. There is no project which is implementable to conclusion without definite parameters of implementation, clear framework, and sustainability, which is output of a project. In this affordable housing, there is nowhere that we are mentioning sustainability. So the technocrats were not involved in this. A few people with their own passion and quest and thirst that they want to fulfill sat down, coined, and put it on paper, and no wonder it is being sneaked in as a rush. As legislators who are representing the citizens of this country, we know very well that we are undergoing tough times in this country. Even the members of the legislatures in this House are finding it rough Because when we get our pay slips, they are zero, deducted. You can't even understand from where you are coming from and where you are heading to. Yet we are the representatives of the people. This brings me to the question, what about the common mwananchi who is not employed, is not even near Mama Mboga, who can sell even 1,000 shillings per day? I want to say that this kind of affordable housing that we are talking about today, in the objects of the Constitution, primarily, we are saying that fairness is not taken care of. And when we are talking about fairness in this country, when the Constitution is highlighting on fairness, there is no fairness even on the deduction of the employed. There is no fairness of other members of this country on how they're going to foot the taxes. Under the objects of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to say that inclusivity, which is enshrined in our Constitution, is not factored in the framework of this bill that is proposed. Why am I saying so, Mr. Speaker, sir? When we are talking about Mama Mboga, the Hustler Nation, it is very clear, because I rise to represent, as the county MP of Homa Bay, the PWDs, there is nowhere they're mentioned. We want to say that even the inclusivity is not captured in this proposed bill, because at what point are the youths who are not employed, the women who are not employed, the PWDs who are there? So we are saying framework on inclusivity is missing in this proposed bill. Mr. Speaker, sir, it was very clear that this is a county bill. Yes, I agree. In the same Constitution, there is the interrelatedness of the county government and the national government. Mr. Speaker, sir, that is not clearly articulated in this proposed bill, because we are only seeing in the fourth schedule the aspect of the ownership and the board of management. We are sneaking in the CS, we are sneaking in the CEO, of whom I don't know the identification mechanism. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have 47 counties in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, the framework of identification of the pieces of land is not articulated. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are talking of a public participation which is purported to have taken place. We know the segments of a public participation. Was there adequacy in the notice being provided? Was there involvement of adequate stakeholder and inclusivity of the same? Was it at the local level of the beneficiary who's going to get it? We only saw a spotted flashlight TV, some people seated with good bottles of water somewhere. Are we talking of affordable houses for Mama Mboga, or we are just imagining of things which are not right? Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to say that this House must hold and respect the court order. In regard of this was already stopped, it was important and necessary that we be firm as legislatures and arm of the government, so that we review what we want to bring in place. Because once we rush it, that we have to do this, then take it to the Senate House for corroboration, whatever, that is wrong. That is misleading, Mr. Speaker, sir. I want to say that I also want to highlight that there is prioritization of needs. Why am I mentioning that, Mr. Speaker, sir? What is this rush of the affordable housing? Yet this country, as a country, I'm bringing on board the issues that the government should address. Education, which is key important. Right now, as I'm speaking, we know very well that our education is in a total mess. If we are a government that prioritizes needs of the Kenyan citizen, why don't we look into issues which are weighty, that when we tell the Kenyans that these taxes are going to go to this kind of development, it is going to improve us? Mr. Speaker, sir, we have issues of water and electricity. What is this rush of affordable housing? Teachers have gotten loans and acquired houses. People have built houses in various towns and go back home. You cannot cheat Mama Mboga. There is no framework on which Mama Mboga is going to acquire this house. There is no framework in which the unemployed border, the youth is going to acquire this house. This is not a priority. There are households who are living in a grass-thatched house, but they are doing business and affording to take their children to school. Let us support them. Mr. Speaker, I'm saying it will be wrong, it will be illegal for this House to accept and propose this bill and pass it through unless we want to take Kenyans into rush. Now, when you're talking of the people who are owning the steel companies in the industries, the big industries in this country, I want to count that the very few population of Kenyans owning those industries. When you walk around, even in town here in Nairobi, you'll find most of the industries we have owned by the Asians, we have owned by the Chinese. The Africans themselves are few in this. Who is going to import this timber from Congo? I want to urge this government to tap the underutilized resources from our counties. Bring in investors and pour in and look for grants to ensure that in as much as affordable housing is moving on, resources are revived so that there is sustainability and increased funding, and in terms of improving our cost of living and economic status. Go to Homa Bay, we have a lake. Bring us the industries. Don't open up fish ponds in places where there are no lakes, so that we have fish which is not fish, that we know very well was found in the lake. Let us have things which can sustain our locals from where they are. We have forests which can be undertapped. We have tourism. We have many things that we can do. Even the people who are employed in the private sectors, when you look at those people at lunchtime, they are very hungry. They have taken Githeri for 10 shillings with being underpaid. And then we are talking about, we want to build this immediately. We want to bring steel. We want to bring timber. Bring from where? And the Kenyan himself is unempowered. I want to say that this House must reject this until the process and framework of implementation is clearly put in place. When it is brought, we shall support, and we get that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
That is the MP for Homa Bay County. I open the one.
Ili kupata uzembe kama sikiza tune yako, bonyeza *812 *498#.
Hakuna baraka yoyote katika uzembe. Uzembe huleta umasikini, upweke na sikia. Umepewa mikono na akili. Ondoka, nenda katafute, kafanye kazi. Na usione kidogo ukakidharau.
Kupata uzembe kama sikiza tune, bonyeza *812 *498#. *812 *498#.
KBC Channel 1 continues to bring you the exciting Football Kenya Federation Premier League, with 2 matches being aired live each weekend. This Saturday, Kenya Police battles Shabana, while Posta Rangers will take on Ulinzi Stars. Watch this double-header from Police Circle Stadium, kicking off at 1 p.m. and 4 p.m, live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner.
Sasa, kimya kotini. Wewe, mzee, nakuulizaje? Hii hata mtoto wa kuzaliwa ya mtosha? Hii.
Nani alimletea?
Si anasema wewe ndio ulileta.
Na wewe ni mtu wa online ama wewe ni mtu wa kushonewa nguo?
Mimi sijui. Hakuna kitu online hakuna.
Sijui. Ulisemea kwa online ama ulisemea wapi?
Kwa online.
Kwa online?
Yeah.
Tuliongea na wewe ana kwa online.
Mbona?
Wewe nyamasa, si wewe nauliza wewe namna gani bwana? Na wewe ni mtu ambaye yuko na akili msuri.
Ndio conman.
Kwa nini unaota vitu za tori na wewe mwenyewe uko na pick machine? Why? Kuna mahali wewe uliakisha tukuletee bidhaa kutoka online? Abana, si ndio?
No.
Si utoke tu nje tafadhali. Mimi sitaki kelele na wewe tafadhali.
I'm a friend. A friend who wants to tell you that your husband has been cheating on you for a very long time.
Are you serious?
You heard me.
Alonzo wants me out of this business, and I'm not going to let that happen.
Remember that time when you told me that you were leaving Serio? It never crossed my mind that you have a wicked plan of getting another man, which eventually turned out to be your sister's boyfriend. And to top it off, you're expecting his baby. No wonder why your father suffered a heart attack.
Shut up! Didn't I tell you that I'm going to stay here? I'll never leave you. I'm not going to leave you.
Starboy.